Trends can be a dangerous thing in any medium, but especially in video games. As we've seen so often over the years, so often developers and publishers pick the wrong trends, or on the right trends for the right reasons, which inevitably leads to widespread dissatisfaction among players. If we're putting it mildly, though. By that same token, the right trends can be a great thing, because at least up until a certain point, you can't really say no to more of a good thing. Of course, what's good and what isn't ends up being entirely subjective, but as far as we're concerned, there have been several pleasing trends in gaming over the last several months that we're hoping to see more of, at least in the near future. Here, that's exactly what we'll be talking about. Remake announcements. Yes, we've had plenty of remake announcements and releases in recent years, and it's certainly not a new hot trend for 2022, but it did certainly pick up steam this year. Several major remakes of beloved games were announced this year, including the likes of Resident Evil 4, Silent Hill 2, The Witcher, Like a Dragon Ishin, The Last of Us Part 1, Lollipop Chainsaw, and many others. Meanwhile, leaks have claimed that a Metal Gear Solid 3 remake is also in the works, while under the Embracer Group's ownership, franchises like Deus Ex may also end up seeing remakes at some point in the future. Dormant franchises coming back. Success is never guaranteed for franchises, no matter how big or beloved they may be. There's no shortage of examples of such franchises that have stumbled one time too many only to be put on ice. Many of them do eventually end up coming back into the limelight though, and this year brought that revival for several of them. The biggest example is obviously Silent Hill, a massive pillar of the medium that has been dormant for so long, but announced multiple major upcoming titles in 2022. On the relatively less mainstream end of the spectrum, you have something like Alone in the Dark, another dead franchise that's been emboldened by Resident Evil's success to make a comeback. Hell, even Monkey Island came back from the dead. Absolutely no one could have predicted that. Horror games. The horror genre was in the worst shape of its life not too long ago, but we're now at a point where the exact opposite seems to be the case. More and more each year, we get new releases and announcements for new horror games, and that was true in 2022 as well. Major titles like Resident Evil 4 and multiple Silent Hill games were announced, while we also saw the likes of The Quarry, Scorn, and many others releasing this year as well. Linear games. It feels like every new game that comes out these days wants to be bigger and more complex, often to the point of being bloated. The distinct lack of linear games has definitely been something of an issue in recent years, though thankfully we did get a few of those in 2022. A Plague Tale Requiem, Evil West, Sifu, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and Tunic are just a few examples of excellent linear games that we got to play over the last year. Excellent indies. It became incontestably clear not long ago that indies had become a crucial pillar of the industry, and in 2022 they were flying higher than they probably ever have. Think back on the last year and think of all the great indies that came out in that period. The list is frankly ridiculous. Stray, Sifu, Rogue Legacy 2, Citizen Sleeper, Tunic, Return to Monkey Island, Shovel Knight Dig, Ollie Ollie World, Weird West, Neon White, Nobody Saves the World, Vampire Survivors, The Entropy Center, Signalis, we can go on. Marvel announcements. Marvel is clearly making a big push in the games industry, and that's been abundantly clear over the last few years. And in 2022, the company announced several more major upcoming titles in partnership with a number of developers. Motive Studio is officially working on an Iron Man game, which is part of a multi-game agreement between EA and Marvel, which, according to leaks, will also include an open-world Black Panther game. Meanwhile, Skydance New Media is also working on a story-driven single-player action-adventure Marvel game, which will be set in the Second World War and star Captain America and the Black Panther of that era. On top of that, Marvel Snap was also unveiled this year and launched not long afterwards. EA likes single-player again. Over the years, an increasing number of developers and publishers have sworn off single-player games, decrying them as financial risks and making claims about how they don't have much of an audience. That, of course, has been proven unequivocally false time and time again, to the extent that even EA, one of the most outspoken critics of single-player games, has started to come back to single-player experiences. A lot of these were announced this year, in fact, including the likes of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Wild Hearts, and the aforementioned Iron Man game. Beyond that, we also have Dead Space, which is launching in January, while the next Mass Effect installments will also be exclusively single-player games. Subscription services. The subscription boom has really caught on in the games industry these last few years, thanks almost exclusively to Game Pass. And this year, Sony finally decided to throw its hat into the ring as well. PlayStation Plus's new tiered approach may not be on the same level as Game Pass, but it's still good value for the money, and if nothing else, paves the way for what will hopefully be a bright future for subscription services on PlayStation. Clearly, this is a trend that we're catching on. Hell, even Nintendo seems to be dipping its toes in the water with Nintendo Switch Online, and we're all for it. Day-and-date Game Pass releases. Day-and-date Game Pass releases have been one of the biggest weapons the service has had in its arsenal since day one, and though it only started out with that perk being applied to first-party titles, more and more third-party releases have also been jumping on board. That touched new heights in 2022, with a number of major third-party games releasing day one for Game Pass. That includes the likes of A Plague Tale Requiem, Somerville, MLB The Show 22, Football Manager 2023, Scorn, and many others. And yes, 2023 is looking even more promising on this front. Fighting game announcements. The last few years have seen several new excellent fighting games, but with Arc System Works having done the majority of the lifting there, franchises that are generally considered giants of the genre have been largely absent. In 2022, however, both Street Fighter VI and Tekken 8 were unveiled. Both are looking quite promising, and both were shown off plenty this year, which, for fans of fighting games, was the perfect scenario. Shorter gaps between announcement and release. There's nothing more frustrating than when a game ends up taking years to come out even after having been officially announced, but thankfully an increasing number of publishers are deciding to have a much shorter gap between announcement and launch. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, for instance, was announced earlier this year and is going to launch in March, while Need for Speed Unbound only had a few months between its reveal and release. The likes of Assassin's Creed Mirage, Like a Dragon Ishin, The Last of Us Part 1, and others are yet more examples of that. Of course, we still get more than our fair share of announcements that are way ahead of schedule, but hopefully that number will continue to go down as we move forward. Behind-the-scenes looks at early development. Part of what makes the aforementioned gaps between announcement and launch so frustrating is how little we get to see of those games for long stretches. That's understandable, of course, because developers don't want to show their games until they're as far along in development as they possibly can be. In 2022, however, we saw perhaps the beginnings of a trend from EA in particular, where developers were willing to show off early development footage of their games. We got to see behind-the-scenes early dev footage and gameplay for both Dead Space and Skate, and we'd definitely like to see more of that with other games in the future. Film and TV adaptations. It finally feels like we're at a turning point with film and TV adaptations of video games, especially with HBO's The Last of Us premiering not too long from now. In fact, over the course of 2022, it's felt like that's only kept on gathering more momentum. Think of how many major gaming properties have either film or TV adaptations in the works. Ghost of Tsushima, Horizon, Death Stranding, Gran Turismo, Borderlands, Gears of War, and many others. Of course, there's no guarantee that all of them are going to be good, but some of them definitely will be, and that's incredibly exciting. Pokémon is good again. In spite of continued commercial success, Pokémon had been on an uncontrolled downward spiral for a long time until not that recently, but in 2022 it finally stabilized and actually made a remarkable recovery. The 1-2 punch of Pokémon Legends Arceus and Pokémon Scarlet and Violet has breathed new life into the franchise. Pokémon has been reinvented at long last, and the new gameplay foundations that have been put in place hint at an exciting future for the series. Obviously, there's still a lot of kinks to be worked out and a lot of improvements to be made, especially with the technical stuff, but for the first time in a long time, the future looks bright for mainline Pokémon games. That's all for now. If you enjoy what you saw, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, now is a great time to subscribe. We upload brand new videos every single day. After subscribing, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time, right here on GamingBolt.